The following program was produced by the United States Courts.
Hello, I'm Chris Thomas with the United States Courts. In this edition of Court Shorts, we'll focus on the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. If you are charged with a crime that puts you at risk of going to jail and you cannot afford a lawyer, the court must provide one for you. But why should you care about the rights of those accused of crimes? This is one of the questions that students ask federal judges and attorneys who work in the criminal justice system. Let's hear what they have to say.
What is the right to counsel and why is it important?
Well, the right to counsel is really the fundamental cornerstone of our justice system. Imagine a system of justice where you don't have the right to a lawyer, where you could simply be accused of doing something wrong and taken right to prison.
It is a bedrock principle that requires judges to appoint attorneys to represent defendants or people charged with criminal conduct.
With a lawyer, you have the right to contest the evidence, to gather witnesses, to fight for your rights, and also, if you are guilty of a crime, to make sure that whatever punishment is imposed is a fair and just punishment.
It ensures that there's a fair system of justice and that as a prosecutor, we have a special burden to make sure that that's true.
We recognize that every person who is charged with a crime, who faces the loss of liberty, is entitled to counsel, whether they can afford it or not, and if they can't afford it, they should be given counsel at government expense.
How did the right to counsel get established?
The right to counsel was established via the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
The Sixth Amendment includes a number of important protections for ensuring that everyone gets a fair trial, right to counsel being the principal provision in the Sixth Amendment.
The landmark decision was Gideon versus Wainwright.
Mr. Gideon was accused of stealing from a pool hall and went to trial and asked the judge for a lawyer.
He could not afford to hire his own counsel, so he asked the court for one. The judge in that case, consistent with Florida law at the time, turned him down.
He was convicted and then from prison wrote a 5-page handwritten petition to the Supreme Court asking them to review his case.
Explaining that he had been charged with a crime, requested a lawyer, not been given one. The Supreme Court took up this case, appointed a lawyer to represent him at the Supreme Court to present this argument, and ultimately decided that he was correct.
That anyone who is accused of a crime that could potentially lose their liberty or be imprisoned should be appointed counsel to represent them in their criminal proceeding.
Mr. Gideon then had a new trial, and the jury only deliberated an hour before finding him not guilty, proving that a lawyer really was essential to Mr. Gideon getting a fair day in court.
What happens if someone like me can't afford an attorney?
If someone can't afford an attorney, based on the Gideon case, they're entitled to a free lawyer, a lawyer appointed by the court who specializes in representing people accused of crimes.
You don't need to be destitute. You don't need to be unemployed. The courts recognize that counsel can be expensive.
And you would think that any system that had any modicum of fairness about it would at least give that individual the resources that it needs to fight back, especially in light of the fact that we all enjoy a presumption of innocence until we're proven guilty.
Does the right to counsel apply to kids?
Yes, the right to counsel does apply to kids. Kids who are accused of committing a crime have a right to an attorney also.
It applies to anyone. It applies to anyone who's accused of a crime that faces a punishment. Whether you're a kid or an adult or a grandparent, you have the same right to a lawyer.
Why should someone like me be concerned about the right to counsel? I'll never commit a crime.
Even though you will never commit a crime yourself, you still may be accused of a crime. It's easy to accuse someone of doing something wrong.
These things are really about protecting all of us, not just people who are accused. They're about protecting all of us from an overreach by our government.
You want to have confidence in our justice system. And if you have a lawyer on both sides, and both sides are well represented, that gives the public confidence that the result that comes out of that trial is fair and just.
For podcasts, trial simulations, homework help, and much more on the right to counsel, explore the Educational Resources section at www.uscourts.gov. For this edition of Court Shorts, I'm Chris Thomas.